November 1922, deep in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, a sealed doorway was uncovered after lying hidden for over 3,000 years untouched. Behind that stone door waited a boy king's tomb, packed with gold, chariots, jewelry, and secrets nobody alive had seen before. Within weeks of opening that tomb, several men connected to the discovery began dying suddenly, sparking global rumors of an ancient curse. Newspapers exploded with headlines about mummies' curses, vengeful spirits, and pharaohs punishing those who dared disturb their eternal resting place. But scientists suspected something far less supernatural was hiding inside that tomb, something written not in magic, but in bones. Archaeologist Howard Carter had spent years searching this valley, funded by a wealthy patron growing impatient after seasons of failure. Most experts believed the valley held nothing left to find, already stripped bare by ancient tomb robbers centuries earlier. Carter disagreed, convinced one king's tomb remained buried, forgotten, and completely intact beneath the desert sand and rubble. On November 4th, workers found a hidden step cut directly into solid rock, leading down into pure darkness. A staircase appeared, then a sealed doorway, stamped with a name barely remembered by modern historians, Tutankhamun. History had dismissed him as a minor king, an unimportant footnote squeezed between more famous, more powerful pharaohs. What Carter uncovered behind that door would soon become archaeology's most legendary discovery of the entire 20th century. Not because of who Tutankhamun was in life, but because of what his remains could later reveal. 6 weeks after the tomb opened, Carter's financial backer, Lord Carnarvon, died suddenly from an infected mosquito bite. The timing felt impossible to ignore, and newspapers worldwide declared the pharaoh's curse had claimed its first victim. Dozens of unrelated deaths were soon linked to the tomb, feeding a curse legend that spread across continents. But researchers asked a very different question, ignoring curses entirely, focused only on cold, testable, physical evidence instead. What actually killed an 18-year-old king 3,000 years ago? And could his preserved body still answer that? That question would remain unanswered for almost a century, waiting for technology Carter could never have imagined existing. Buried inside Tutankhamun's own cells was a hidden story involving malaria, deformity, inbreeding, and a collapsing royal bloodline. The tomb was sealed to protect a king's soul, yet it preserved genetic evidence scientists wouldn't understand for decades. To understand what researchers eventually discovered in his blood, we must first travel back to his troubled family's beginning. Ancient Egypt, roughly 1,300 years before Christ, stood at the height of wealth, ruling lands stretching far along the Nile River. But behind the golden temples, the royal family itself was quietly unraveling, strained by religion, politics, and dangerous family decisions. Tutankhamun's father, widely believed to be Pharaoh Akhenaten, had shattered Egyptian tradition by abolishing worship of the ancient gods entirely. He forced the entire kingdom to worship one single deity, the sun disk Eten, ignoring centuries of religious custom. Temples closed overnight, priesthoods lost their power and income, and Egypt slid into confusion, resentment, and quiet rebellion. When Akhenaten finally died, he left behind a fractured kingdom desperate for stability, tradition, and a return to normalcy. Into that chaos, a small child was placed on the throne, expected to rule a broken, uncertain empire alone. Tutankhamun became pharaoh at around 9 years old, almost certainly guided entirely by powerful advisors ruling behind the scenes. His short reign restored the old forgotten gods, reopening temples closed under his father's radical, unpopular religious experiment. But his time on the throne barely lasted a decade before the young king suddenly, mysteriously died. By 18 or 19 years old, he was gone, buried hastily inside a modest, unimpressive tomb. That tomb sat inside a valley reserved for far grander, wealthier, more powerful pharaohs throughout Egyptian history. For generations afterward, later rulers tried erasing Tutankhamun's memory completely, along with his controversial father's name. His name was violently chiseled from monuments, deliberately removed from official king lists across the entire kingdom. That intentional erasure may have accidentally protected him, keeping his small tomb hidden and largely forgotten. Because his burial site seemed unimportant, ancient robbers mostly ignored it, while grander tombs nearby were completely stripped. When Carter finally broke through in 1922, he found something almost no other pharaoh's tomb still contained. An intact burial chamber, golden masks, ancient chariots, furniture, and the king's own remarkably preserved mummified body. For decades afterward, historians debated fiercely over simple, unanswered questions about his parents, his health, and his death. Early theories were dramatic and sensational, suggesting a violent blow, a hunting accident, or even secret palace murder. Each new generation of Egyptologists proposed another possible cause of death, based on frustratingly limited physical evidence. The mummy itself had been damaged during early 1920s examinations, making later scientific analysis even more difficult. For decades, physical clues alone stayed maddeningly ambiguous, refusing to reveal exactly what had happened to this king. It would take 21st century genetic technology, not archaeology alone, to finally move beyond pure speculation and guesswork. In 2010, researchers led by Zahi Hawass used genetic testing and detailed CT scans on 11 royal mummies. Tutankhamun's remains were included, finally offering scientists a real chance at answering centuries of unresolved historical questions. The results were immediately striking, revealing that his parents were almost certainly full siblings, a brother and sister. Both were children of Akhenaten himself, meaning the boy king's own parents shared the exact same father. Royal incest wasn't entirely unknown during this era, since pharaohs sometimes married close relatives to protect divine bloodlines. But researchers discovered the genetic cost of that tradition may have been far more severe than anyone expected. Scientists identified clear evidence of several disorders present throughout Tutankhamun's skeletal remains and preserved soft tissue. His feet showed signs of a painful bone condition called Köhler disease, making ordinary walking genuinely difficult. CT scans also revealed a club foot alongside a cleft palate, both consistent with inherited genetic complications. Over 100 walking canes were found buried carefully alongside him, an unusually large number for any burial. That single detail hinted at something historians hadn't fully appreciated before this genetic research existed. This king may not have simply died young by pure accident or sudden violent misfortune. He may have lived his entire short life dealing with constant, chronic physical pain and difficulty. Genetic analysis also detected material from Plasmodium falciparum, the parasite responsible for the deadliest form of malaria. Researchers proposed several factors converged together: weak bone structure, walking difficulty, and a severe malaria infection combined. This combination may have simply been more than his already fragile young body could ultimately survive. Scientists were careful not to present this theory as absolute, undeniable certainty regarding his exact cause of death. Ancient DNA remains fragile, easily contaminated, and genuinely difficult to interpret with complete scientific confidence. Some researchers have since challenged parts of the original 2010 study and its specific methods. Debate over Tutankhamun's true cause of death continues actively among scientists and historians even today. What most researchers do agree on is clear. His genetic profile shows definite signs of family inbreeding. That inbreeding likely contributed to poor health across his entire family, not just within his own body. His 2 stillborn daughters, buried quietly beside him, showed skeletal abnormalities matching similar genetic disorders themselves. Modern genetics didn't simply solve one historical mystery. It revealed a deeply human story of fragility and consequence. A fragile king, a fractured dynasty, and a body carrying the biological cost of powerful political ambition. So the ancient curse was never truly supernatural, never driven by vengeful spirits or magical punishment at all. The real story hidden inside that tomb was written quietly in chromosomes, not in mystical curses or legends. It was a family bloodline weakened slowly across generations by repeated, deliberate intermarriage among close royal relatives. Tutankhamun wasn't murdered by some jealous rival, nor struck down by angry, vengeful ancient spirits. He may have simply been a sickly teenager, walking with a cane, quietly fighting a parasite alone. That single realization reframes everything about the golden mask that eventually made him world famous. That mask wasn't only a symbol of power, glory, or divine royal authority over Egypt. It may have quietly covered a body already shaped entirely by fragility, pain, and hidden disease. This is exactly why Tutankhamun's tomb still matters, a full century after Carter first opened it. It remains one of history's clearest examples of ancient DNA completely rewriting a story we assumed was settled. It proves how archaeology and genetics, working carefully together, can answer questions ancient inscriptions never truly could. The past isn't fixed or finished. It's still actively being decoded through careful modern scientific investigation. It raises a quieter, far more human question hidden beneath all the gold and glittering treasure. Behind the myths, the headlines, and endless curse stories, there was simply one young man in pain. He was a teenage ruler, governing a kingdom he barely had enough time to truly understand. His tomb was built to make him eternal, and in a strange way, it succeeded completely. Not through magic, curses, or ancient supernatural power, but through modern science finally learning to listen. His bones had been quietly speaking this entire story, waiting patiently for someone to finally understand them. If you want more real history, decoded through actual science instead of exaggerated legend, stay close. There are still more forgotten stories waiting patiently underground, hidden inside tombs nobody has opened yet.